Now you're good.
Good?
Now you're good.
Okay, let's try that again. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're the Beo String Quartet. Thanks for tuning in. This is an inside look, our 8th episode now. We'll be covering a piece that we have actually had the pleasure of performing for quite a, I don't know how many times. Many times. Many times. A piece by Kyle Sanna, and it's called Sequence for Minor White. Thanks. So this is just one movement from this multi-movement work, Sequence for Minor White by Kyle Sanna. This movement was called Frost. We're going to dive in a little bit about the titles and all the neat little things. The first thing I wanted to mention is, as I mentioned, we have this piece. We've had this piece for quite a while. It was actually the winning piece for the, this is always a mouthful, Charlotte New Music and Beo String Quartet Composition Competition. Woo, nail it?
Yes.
All right, good. 2017. So this was the selected winner out of, I forget how many submitted pieces, and we started performing it in 2018. And we've actually, it's been in our cycling through our repertoire really ever since. So we've had quite a few chances to do it. I'll just mention a couple of basic things about it, and then I actually think it'd be neat for us to hear from the composer. So this is based on the photography of Minor White. It uses quite a few, let's say, extended techniques. For those of you watching, what we call extended techniques is sort of a generic term for things that we don't just typically need to do in, let's say, the 18th century music. Is that fair?
Or even 19th century.
Or 19th century sometimes, and yeah. And really, it's, like I say, it's quite generic, as you'll see the farther we dive into this. It uses mobile form, which, again, we'll get into this as well, but essentially the order of movements is flexible. We have some say in the order of movements, and even beyond that, we have some say in which movements to be performed, meaning you don't have to do all the movements. Actually, as I'm saying this, I realized I never asked Kyle, could you play the same movement twice?
No.
Anyways, each movement opens and closes with a repeated section, which is what allows us to transition between the movements, which will change quite a bit depending on the order we select.
You mean the movements are connected? Like we don't stop playing in between. Like if you're a listener, you have to listen. Oh, the texture has changed a lot. This sounds totally different. Oh, we must be in a different movement.
Yes, exactly. And the idea is that it is constant. If you were listening, you might not know it's 9 movements or however many. You might just think it's this piece going through all these different transitions. And then the other thing that, to facilitate this, is more of a practical thing. We can trade parts in places if necessary. So, in fact, we have to do that today, depending on the order of things that we've selected. I have to cover for Sean while he turns a page, or sometimes where he's working the computer.
It's a violist's dream, really, because for a moment I can be a first violin.
That's right.
And I just let my chest puff out. I get a little more arrogant. No, kidding.
So I think that's more or less the basics of what this makes different before we zoom in any further. Let's hear from Kyle a little bit. So here's Kyle Sanna.
Yeah, so I'm Kyle Sanna, the composer of Sequence for Minor White. I'm a composer, guitarist, improviser. I live in Brooklyn, New York. And I got to hear Beo perform this at the Charlotte New Music Festival in North Carolina. It was performed in a brew pub.
That's right.
Like a packed house, and it was just a beautiful moment. Yeah, really memorable.
Okay,
that's a great memory.
Yeah.
I got to be here when you were doing the interview. When Kyle mentioned that, I was like, that was a really fun, effective performance.
Yeah, and all the music on that program, I remember just really liking, enjoying. And actually, wasn't that also in we coordinated that with WDAV?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive a little deeper into this stuff, but first, I think we need to take a little pivot because I'm always interested in this type of work, and what I mean by this type of work is Kyle used another artist's medium, or another artist that belongs to a different medium, in this case, visual art, as, I don't know if you would say inspiration or something along those lines while creating this piece. And when I was asking him about it, of course, the first thing that comes to mind, he referenced, which was pictures at an exhibition, right? Mussorgsky. Mm-hmm. I believe he said that was sort of an inspiration to go this route. Now, of course, knowing that piece, this is really different. But you can see the link there. Can you think of other examples of this? And it doesn't necessarily even have to be visual art. And what I mean is, where a composer uses another artist or another medium or maybe a play or a sonnet or something else as their inspiration for their music.
Like for me, I don't know if I've really talked about this, because we all have our own particular musical fascinations. Mine is the art songs of Schumann and Schubert, and a lot of those, the start with poems that those guys just liked. They pulled them out of different publications, different collections. Sometimes they don't even go together, the poems, and they throw them together and put them in one song cycle. And you can read the poems and have your own experience, and they're really, really cool. And then you hear the song, and a lot of times, like, they might draw one word out for like 5 seconds, and then it's like, oh wow, I just had 4 different emotional experiences inside of that one word because of the music. And like, I didn't get that from just reading the poem. It's like this totally new thing, but it wouldn't work unless the poem came first. I don't like art songs all the time. Okay.
Oh gosh.
How about you? Anything
Well,
that comes to
I'm
mind?
thinking more in the dance realm, and also how that sometimes goes in different directions. So sometimes a composer will write, say, music for a ballet, intending for it to be danced to. But oftentimes it will go the other way around, and a choreographer will take a piece of music that he or she really likes and say, hey, I would like to choreograph something that goes to this music. So it you know, it's gone in different directions.
What comes to mind for me right away is just like something like Shakespeare. You know,
Yeah.
think about, just pick one of them. Pick Romeo and Juliet, the obvious choice. I mean, how many can you think of, you know, at the top of your head? For me, also, personally, I think about, didn't you write some different settings to Hamlet?
I did.
And the point being how it can affect. So it's the same sonnet, right? It's just, the person is using the same words, but how would the music, you know, change it?
Yeah,
something like that.
I
right?
was young, but I wanted to show how the music could completely influence what the listener is feeling, even though they're the same words. And so it was the famous "To Be or Not to Be." It's, purposely did that version, and version A was very intense, very energetic, high, almost minimalistic, and version 2 was the slowest, most calm thing. And it was interesting to hear how different readers couldn't help but be influenced in how they would read it as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
Yeah. Well, obviously, you know, why a composer might choose one of these things is a very personal thing. I wanted to know from Kyle, why did he choose minor whites? Because, I mean, I will say that for my part, I had not heard of minor white before working on this piece. And of course, since then I've done some research and, of course, looked at all these photographs. It's very different, but it was new to me. So my question to Kyle is, why did you choose minor white?
So I was familiar with minor white's photography through my father, who's a photographer himself, and in the I guess it'd be probably the early 70s, my father participated in a few workshops that minor white had going on, where photographers would come and he would sort of mentor them. My dad gave me a book of his, like, I don't know, many years ago, and I don't remember like the moment of deciding on minor white, but it was just, you know, something that was floating through my head, and so I you know, it's not there's not like a 1-to-1 ratio between like image and sound. There's like there's so many ways you can interpret, like how do you respond to an image with sound. And in minor white's work, there's a lot of, he really created a lot of motion and movement within like a still image, and I sort of wanted to create this the mirror of that. So in music, which is a time-based form, try to create stillness.
Did you know that before hearing this answer? Because
Something's tickling in my head, you know, when we were first working with Kyle, that he mentioned something like that, to create stillness in the music in the same way that you know, you have a chance to have a look at a photograph. It doesn't move on you. You
Sure.
know, you can spend some time on the details. A lot of these pieces are minimalist textures that kind of stay the same for a little while. Of course they don't, but you get that feeling of it.
it's a fascinating answer to me, because it's the essence of us, of what we do is instrumentalist, is motion. We need to pull the bow to make noise. We need to move in a certain way to help that resonate. I mean, it literally is, but of course he's talking on a much more philosophical or artistic level, which is beyond the instruments. And I love that. I love that kind of thinking, that these instruments, yes, all the studying we do, everything that we have to do to play our instruments, but there's this other level that you try to attain, if anything, even with Beethoven or anything else, that it's no longer about that. It's about this, something like more close to the numinous, and I think it's a beautiful, beautiful answer.
You know, in a sense, the question, I don't know. I know why I would have picked minor white, is because the pictures are amazing. They are, a lot of them are like cool nature scenes, or like wintry, you know, I don't know. And the way that he's framed everything up, they look like paintings, but they're photographs, and yeah.
also, it's interesting. Again, I've just feel like I'm just getting to know his work, but all the ones I've seen are black and white. In settings that could be really beautiful in color, but they're not. No, I'm not saying they're all color. I don't know the answer to that, but I will say all of the ones that I have looked through are black and white. And I don't know, something about stillness feels like that works together for me.
Jason, you tracked a lot of them down for this episode.
Yeah.
How was that whole process like? I mean, because obviously it's someone's intellectual property.
Yes. We are going to show some of these while we go through each of the movements, and that was thanks to Kyle primarily. He mentioned in the interview, now we didn't put it in here, that he wrote this as a commissioning project for another string quartet called Brooklyn Rider, which is a really great string quartet. They're, I believe, are friends of his. And I think they used one of the photographs for the cover of that album. And so he sort of had those links already. So in this case, it was contacting the Minor White Archives at the Princeton University Art Museum, which they graciously have let us, show these, which I think is really neat. Let's dive in a little bit so we can see some, we actually can see them and talk about some of the other movements. So again, the sequence is flexible. The sequence we are going to show, present these in, is the order that we generally have sort of fallen into performing, the order that we tend to like performing them in. But obviously not. It's not the only way. So the first movement we open with is called "Ice at Water's Edge." Now this is based on, or was influenced by, a photograph called Stony Brook State Park, New York. And again, "Ice at Water's Edge." I suppose if you look closely, you can get the description from that. Let's play a little bit of it. It's hard to stop that one, isn't it? Yeah. We have to apologize to Kyle if you're watching. This is a very practical thing here, but we're supposed to blow into the F-holes of our instrument. Would someone want to demonstrate what this sounds like?
It's a beautiful, super artistic sound, and it works really well. But obviously, for the state of where we are right now, we thought it's probably not the best. So instead, you got the very much more cheap version of beautiful note, followed by
heavy breathing, right? Or maybe ate too much.
Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is very effective when you can do it the way it is. And we actually have found in performances, when we start with that, we usually start spread across the room. We don't start standing like this. The reactions that people have is awesome because they're immediately transported to not being in a concert, to not listening to a string quartet, to being a part of a picture. And I think in that sense, he's incredibly successful with that.
And of course, the singing too.
Right.
The singing is, I think, pretty neat. So that's the Ice at Water's Edge. Next is Frost. Now, we already played Frost for you. It's what we opened with. Here's what the photograph looks like. And it's called 72 North Union Street, Rochester.
It's an awesome picture.
It's really, isn't it? It's really stunning. Anybody have any thoughts on this movement, Frost, and how it pertains to that picture?
I mean, you probably already said this is the one that we opened with after the
Yes.
credits ran.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful movement. The tension builds so organically to a point. It starts in incredibly peacefulness with these harmonics, just like wind chimes almost, and then magically we have arrived at this giant chord that we just give everything, and all that's left is this lone violin. Again, that to me is the stillness. Somehow creates a crescendo of texture and sonority, but in this just incredibly organic way. It's just really effective. And I believe they are going to hear this again at the end, so we
Yes.
don't need to
Yes.
dive into it right now.
So let's take a look at this movement. It's called When There Is No Further Down to Go, the bottom drops out. Oh, I knew I was going to do that. Okay, let me start again.
It's a bit of a tongue twister.
It is a tongue twister.
It's a
When
brain
there is
twister too.
when there is no further down to go, the bottom drops out on up. I think this one's one of my favorites. Let's play a little bit of this. Oh, I didn't name the picture, by the way. For anybody curious, this is called Vicinity of Baker and North Powder, Oregon. And from what I was reading, Minor White has ties to Oregon.
It's a lot
See
easier to
some of these
understand the
pictures.
title. With,
So let's just play a little bit of this. To me, I, in this movement, feel a lot of what Kyle talked about with the stillness. We're left hanging on these sometimes uncomfortable, moments.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen next? And then this is also interesting, just musically speaking. Of course, this becomes, quite important in the piece. We see it in several of the movements.
that pattern of notes.
Yeah, yeah.
It keeps coming back over
It keeps
and over.
coming back, yeah. Or variations of it, yeah.
I don't know the answer to this,
Uh-huh.
but do we know which movement Kyle wrote first? Or which movement this theme first appeared, since the order is... Because when I think of it now, since I'm pretty used to this order of events, this is kind of actually the first movement where we get this motive, and then the very end of it feels kind of like a nostalgic thing, but I suppose if you played it in a different order, it would have a totally different effect.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I don't know. Yeah.
I also don't know the answer to that. I just assumed that the order that I have, the score order was that, but actually there's very little thought put into that. I'm not sure.
Right,
It would be interesting to find out. And since you mentioned that, let's talk about this mobile form for a minute. So, mobile form, I think, is just the idea that, it's almost like a puzzle. That we get some say in this. That's not normal for what we typically play, is it? I mean, what do you think would happen if we showed up to a concert? We're doing Mendelssohn A minor, and we shuffle the movements.
Well, it becomes a big deal. I think it's with Mahler's Sixth Symphony. that there's still disagreements over what's the order of the middle movements, and there are people who swear that it's this, and they have arguments, and it's a big deal when it's performed. Just the fact that that's a big deal says the fact that that is not a thing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it sort of depends on what genre you're, because, you know,
Of course.
if you go to a rock concert, there's a set list, and who knows what order that's going to be. But then, you know, you can also listen to your favorite album, your favorite CD, and the order of the piece is always the same. And then that whole album can kind of start to tell a story from one song to the next, and you're just used to that next one coming after the first one. And a live audience won't get the chance to get used to that order, but, you know, since we have a recording in the works, we really want to choose the order that we like the best.
Let's hear what Kyle has to say about this. So I asked him about the mobile form, essentially why did he choose this format?
I do other stuff besides compose, and I generally sort of question the authority of the composer. You know, I have a lot of faith in performers and musicians and, you know, ensembles like yours that, you know, you've all worked so hard at what you do and you have great musical intuition, and I kind of want to find a place where the intuition of the composer meets that of the performer, and to enlarge that space, so that, for one thing, like, you know, there's more room to sort of claim ownership, and that was really fun. Like hearing, so far I've heard, you know, you and one other quartet play this, and it's just, for me, it's thrilling to hear like where you guys take it versus another group. I know that what I'm writing is intended for performance. I mean, you know, recordings are great too. But if it was just a recording, then I would say, well, let's just fix it. There's no point in having it be like a mobile form and leaving these things open-ended. I also do a lot of studio work, so, you know, I'm familiar with the strengths of that, which are you can get incredibly specific, you can get very detailed, and you know, the author's imprimatur is just the final word there. But I want to maximize the elements that are unique to performance. So to me, like, it is those conversations, musical conversations that are happening between performers on stage, and then the same that's happening between the audience and the performers, and how this shared moment kind of meets at this point of attention that everyone is collectively involved in. And I want, you know, ideally the performers to be listeners too. So I want to encourage that. I want them to pay attention to the moment and to respond to it and to respond to one another. So like leaving these sort of frayed edges of the movements at the beginnings and the end. And there's, you know, those are moments where maybe there's even a little unease as you like, oh, I'm not sure, you know, when this person's going to come in. I'm still playing this, or should I come in? I don't know. Like, or maybe it's just like a moment of discovery as you're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Like the way that the beginning of that movement happened over this other one. In any case, like those are those special moments of performance. As an improviser also, like I kind of I enjoy those moments where you don't exactly know what's going to happen, and we're all involved in this moment together that's only going to happen once. So those are some of my thoughts around why I chose that open-ended form.
It's interesting to hear him talk about that stuff. I think a couple things stick out to me. One is, well, he mentioned that sort of you're not sure exactly what's going to happen, and maybe that leads to a moment of discovery. And I can definitely say that's what happened with us.
Oh yeah.
A lot of A, the order, B, the transitions, how long we stay in a place, or maybe a particular sound rafter sort of just happened while we were performing this. Maybe, and sometimes it's a very practical thing. It wasn't it might have been that you felt very inspired, but it might also have been that I can't turn my page in time now. Ryan has to, make something. So it's pretty interesting that is what happened.
Well, and in a sense, it kind of lets us sort of be the composer as well, because like a lot of times, Kyle might not tell us how many times we're supposed to play a certain part. Like we have to choose on stage in the concert, or he might not tell us how to pace this getting louder and then getting softer, that kind of thing. And we have to experience what's effective and what's not. A lot of times we don't get a chance to improvise like that in a concert.
I've had a lot of very special moments on stage with this piece. I think we've done it 32 times.
Wow.
And I've had a lot of my most powerful, moving, emotional moments for me personally. I've been on stage with this piece, which I would not expect. And I've thought about that. And I think part of it is that so much of what we have to do to survive as a string quartet is calculation. We rehearse, 4 or 5 times a week. Hours we still practice, even though we all have how many hours logged in our instruments. We're always nitpicking intonation, how to be together, because that's what we have to do to make 4 people sound like one. So there's so much calculation. And then when you perform this piece, you have all those elements there. But because of the very nature of how it's structured, there's a lot of moments that we have not heard before. You cannot plan for. For me personally, and I know we're all different on this, but for me personally, that speaks more to the essence of how I want to enjoy and approach art. And I'm not always afforded that because I can't be all the time with the nature of playing viola. But in this piece, it almost calls for that. And so I think that you can absolutely tell the things that he's saying are absolutely baked in there. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
There's something also about, like, when you play with the same people for a long time, and then you're given this, like, what's gonna happen? And then you can kind of read what a person is gonna do.
Sure.
Or if they kind of, like, throw you a confusing bone, that's not a phrase, but whatever, you know how to adapt. Like, Ryan does do that every now and then. Or, if, like, we're doing a little bit of, like, choreography with the given space that we're playing in, okay, Aviva's, like, a little slower because of her shoes coming down this, like, side of the whatever. Like, okay, how are we going to adapt to that? How are we going to make that? So, yeah, I think there's something cool about the flexibility given to a group that plays together all the time, and you get something out of that maybe you wouldn't in another kind of ensemble or setting.
And it's also how, now we can't do it here where we're just stuck in front of the camera in this small room, but a lot of our performances ended up being quite involved in terms of staging, right? Starting it off stage or behind the audience or sometimes in the audience.
Or turning the lights off.
Missing the different colors of the lighting, and all that sort of just kept changing as it went along. And probably for anybody listening who is a regular improviser, maybe this is just what you've been doing forever. But I can say that it's not that typical in what we find ourselves performing,
Yeah.
At least not to that extent.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the next movement, our next movement, which is called Mercury Mind Messenger. What's special about this one?
Well, it's special in a lot of ways. First, it's for cello solo, which is unusual choice for string quartet. It's also very short, but there is a lot of information packed into this piece. They're not typically extended techniques, but I do a lot of different things, alternating quickly the techniques. There's long bowed notes. There's left-hand pizzicato. Normally you pluck with the right hand. It has sort of a tinier sound to it. And, gosh, I play this thing. I'm blanking on it. Oh, there's some sol ponticello hits with the bow, which creates a sort of a raspy, sort of unfocused sound at the bridge.
Before you play it, actually, this one is not based on a photograph.
That was giving me a lot of trouble because I was looking and trying to find one, and you tracked down the source for this one.
Yeah, well, Kyle let me know where it was from, and it's Mirror Messages Manifestations, and it apparently starts with a text which I believe is in your part, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
what
really
does it say?
intense. It says, fires burn on the lintels of doors. flames burn across the ridge poles. It's like,
Wow. Wow.
It's really heavy.
You know,
Oh,
it's
man.
funny is I heard it so many times before knowing this poem, and of course now I remember reading it in the score. But yeah, it makes sense. It really makes sense.
So what is the source? The manifestations? Is it a book? Is it a collection?
It's a book.
What's
Yes, exactly. Text that he wrote. This is
Minor
his
White
text.
authored this text.
Let's. Can you play us a little bit?
Yeah. Etc.
It's like off in a corner. I
Yeah.
never actually get to watch.
It almost feels like we abandoned you for this one.
There's a lot to get ready for. Coming up.
Let's move to the next movement. It's called Movement Study. And it says it's based on Movement Studies number 56. The title being Huntington Hotel, Taylor Street, San Francisco.
What a picture.
This is, isn't it? And it does ring a bell, again, back to what Kyle was talking about, that all, the motion in the still image. I mean, there it is, isn't it?
Early on, when we were rehearsing this piece, we were discussing gestures, floating gestures through, moving through space, kind of, and what I had in my mind was like a scarf, a really thin scarf that you could just kind of move through with your arm. It's crazy to see that picture because that's what it is. I haven't seen that one before.
It's awesome.
Neat. Wow, good job, Kyle. You really wrote that in the music.
Let's just hear, not very long. I don't want us to go too long on the episode, but just at least so we get a flavor of what this is like.
I love this movement. It's one of my favorite movements.
Yeah.
Very delicate, very poised.
So now we come to one just simply called X.
It's like Sesame Street. Today, this episode is brought to you by the
That's
letter
right.
X.
This has got to be one of my favorite ones. Sean, can you pull up the photo of this? This is called Windowsill Daydreaming, 72 North Union Street, Rochester.
Very cool.
Before we even say anything about it, let's just play a little bit. Sean, would you mind leaving that up?
Sure.
So, for anybody watching, if you're wondering what you're listening to, Kyle asked us to do something really interesting. And I'm just going to demonstrate. Is this the right here, Sean? Can I walk right up?
Yeah, the main cam.
So what he has asked us to do is go right on the C-bout of the instrument. And obviously, in order to not strip off the varnish, we've put little protective pieces on here. I don't know how well you can see that, but here's what it sounds like.
It'll be hard to hear from there. But
Can you demonstrate over there? Yeah,
Some of
so-
us accidentally took some varnish off our instruments.
well, I can save any instrumentalists out there the trouble. When we got the score, we first read that, and I was like, oh, I'm curious. I did it for about 5 seconds. Then I looked down. I was like, oh, look at that.
Lost some varnish?
Lost some varnish.
Lost some varnish, yeah.
I'm happy to have done it, Kyle. I'm happy to have done it.
But it's really neat because you get this sort of, I don't know if it's a hiss sound or a wind sound or a white noise, but it's rhythmic.
Oh, yeah.
You get you definitely get that, an energy from it, which is super effective. And then it's so, jarring almost when we tip the bow over and you get the first pitch. Whoa, so neat. We will definitely play this entire one in just a couple minutes, this whole movement, when we're done talking about them.
I'll just add one more thing. It's not just that we're playing a pitch. It's that
That's
we're
right.
playing a pitch with a practice mute, which normally we don't actually use in performance. We have other kinds of mutes for performance that do a little bit less of the silencing. This is something that you would usually play, like if you're practicing in a hotel and you don't want to wake up the neighbors or anything, you'd use a practice mute. But we're
Yes.
using that for the performance, so
Yes.
it creates an actually super cool and specific tone.
Very,
Yeah.
Definitely, yes. How could I forget?
Get used to it.
The next movement, I won't spend that much time on it, but it's called Walking on Water, and similar to the solo cello movement. Now, this is just for solo violin. And also, it is not based on a photo, it is based on a poem. The poem was written by Minor White, and it says, "Each artist going in his own direction, at some time, walks on water." I think it's a neat sound.
Yeah, it's
that he gets
awesome.
with this.
Super effective.
Really unique, and it does, change quite a bit as it goes. Let's move to the last movement, or our last movement again. Tetons, Wyoming. This is based on a really, I think, again, spectacular photograph. Grand Teton National Park, Wyoming. In fact, even just seeing the picture makes me want to go there. I don't think we're going to play through this one right now because we're going to play a short 3-movement version right now. There are a couple of really neat surprises in this. One thing I skipped over that I actually do think we should mention is he uses all these extended techniques. So we're talking about practice mutes, C-bout, blowing into the F-holes, singing, humming, the left-hand pizzicatos, quite a few, and a couple more we haven't quite revealed yet. But
I have to share a story about that.
uh-huh.
So in 2017, we got 80 to 90 scores for the competition. They were narrowed down, and we got, I think, 15 of them, and this piece is one of them. And I remember we were driving somewhere, I was here. I was home here listening in the studio, and I had just the most amazing time, fun time listening to it. Part of it was exactly what you're talking about right now, Jason. We play a lot of new music as well as the classics, but all the time in new music, people are experimenting. And a product of that is these extended techniques, overpressure, all these different things. And it is very difficult. All the techniques that we have to use to play the standard rep, they're all there for a reason. They've lasted the test of time because they make the instrument and music sound better or add a very specific color. And by way of experimenting, there's going to be a lot of extended techniques that I personally don't find attractive, even in a non-attractive way. Like sometimes I don't want to be attracted to something with art.
Sure.
But it's hard to use extended techniques. This was one of the first pieces I'd ever heard that was riddled with extended techniques, but I never thought of them. They're done poetically. They're done to help tell the story, to help bring color across. And it's so genuine that I remember just sitting there, I think at the end of it with a tear coming down and everything, because it was just beautiful. And it wasn't until after that I went to the score and started thinking that, oh, wow, this has tons of different things in it. But I didn't even notice. And I think that's kudos to Kyle for being able to do that. It's so just awesome.
I have almost a mirror, like a reflected version of that, which is, you're talking about when we were trying to select the winning piece.
Yeah.
And I started with the score.
Oh.
And I'm so sorry, Kyle, I don't mean to insult you, but when I saw the score, I sort of rolled my eyes at places. But of course, of the four of us, I might be the most conservative with this stuff, possibly, anyways. And it wasn't until I started messing around with it that I realized, you know what? He doesn't feel like this person is doing this just for the sake of that. Yeah. There actually feels like there's purpose and meaning, and I feel the piece is better from it, which maybe is the key thing for me when I'm looking at this sort of thing. I asked Kyle, why did he incorporate all of these, and this is what he had to say.
I think some of those specific choices, I'm sure, were related to the images, and but also I think there's something to the element of surprise that really just hones our attention. Also being an audience member and seeing the performers do something slightly unusual, that as an audience member, I really enjoy those moments. I'm like, gosh, sometimes I just won't forget them.
I like the last thing he says. Mm-hmm. I have specific things too that stick in my mind because of it. We could go on and on with this. It's it's a fantastic piece, and obviously, these photographs of mine are white. You could have a whole, multiple shows on that as well. What did you guys get out of this? Meaning, aside, normally we're just, studying music and performing music. This now has a different link. Did you feel like you got something different out of it?
I'm still pondering the whole stasis and movement thing, and how, basically what a photograph is doing is it's a still of something that's inherently in motion. I suppose if it's like a fruit bowl, okay, maybe a little bit different, but many of the photos that we've seen are motion in nature, motion of a person moving their scarf, whatever, and when we play, the motion is also inherent, but our job in trying to translate the music is find ways to create stillness that the literal physical music has. It is just notes on a page, but usually when we think of performing, it's we're bringing the notes to life. We're kind of trying to do the opposite in a certain sense, and I think that's a new thought after hearing what Kyle said in the interview, because I wasn't there for that.
Well, let's play a version. I'll just want to say a few thank yous. First of all, thank you to Kyle, first of all, for this really amazing piece, and your time for giving us this interview. I also want to thank the Minor White Archive at Princeton University Art Museum, who graciously let us use these photographs. which is really, I think it really enhances to the experience to see, right, see this. And obviously also Great Lakes Performing Arts Associates for all of their help and assistance in letting us use this platform. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, website, everything. I mean, the list can go on, right?
Just not in person. Don't follow
Just-
us.
no.
There
Yeah.
are laws against that.
So we'll do a shortened version, just for to save on time. We do have a recording of this coming out. Shawnee, word on that?
Yeah, it'll be coming out in April,
Okay.
and I cannot say any more about it because I still need to discuss it with people.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
we're very excited about it. It's in the can, so to speak. Sounds great, and we're looking forward to releasing it.
So we'll do three movements, different order and everything from what we might typically do, and we'll see what happens. As Kyle said, we'll start with Frost, which we opened with. We'll switch over to X, and then to Tetons, Wyoming.
Thank you.